Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sermons from My Heart. This is Craig Condon speaking. Today I'm going to talk about how Jesus gives us spiritual sight. My message is based on Luke chapter 24 verses 13 to 35. Let's listen to that passage now. Now behold, two of them were traveling that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they talked together of all these things which had happened. So it was, while they conversed and reasoned, that Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were restrained so that they did not know him. And he said to them, What kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are sad? Then the one whose name was Cleopas answered and said to him, Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem? And have you not known the things which happened there in these days? And he said to them, What things? So they said to him, The things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, today is the 3rd day since these things happened. Yes, and certain women of our company, who arrived at the tomb early, astonished us. When they did not find his body, they came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. And certain of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. Then he said to them, O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not the Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. Then they drew near to the village where they were going, and he indicated that he would have gone further. But they constrained him, saying, Abide with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is far spent. And he went to stay with them. Now it came to pass, as he sat at the table with them, that he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished from their sight. And they said to one another, Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us on the road, and while he opened the scriptures to us? So they rose up that very hour and returned to Jerusalem, and found the 11 and those who were with them gathered together, saying, The Lord is risen indeed, and has appeared to Simon. And they told about the things that had happened on the road, and how he was known to them in the breaking of bread. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. There once was a little boy named Emmett who couldn't see very well. The funny thing about it was that he didn't know it. In fact, no one knew it. Not his mother or father, his grandmother or grandfather, not even his closest friends knew that Emmett couldn't see very well. Emmett thought that everything in the world had fuzzy edges because that is the way things looked to him. He thought that all of the other children saw things just as he saw them. As he got older, his mother began to wonder why Emmett always sat so close to the TV. His grandfather noticed that when he looked at a book, he held it very close to his face. When Emmett began school, he complained to the teacher that he couldn't see the words on the chalkboard. Finally, everyone began to realize that Emmett needed glasses. Emmett's parents took him to an eye doctor, and the doctor told them Emmett needs glasses. In a few days, Emmett had a brand new pair of glasses. At first he was afraid that the other kids would make fun of him because he had to wear glasses. But when he put the glasses on, he put his worries behind him. Wow! The world looked so different. Suddenly, Emmett discovered that everything in the world didn't have fuzzy edges. He realized that a tree had leaves. He could read a book without holding it right up to his face. He could see his mother's face clearly even when she was all the way across the room. It was great. We may not have trouble with our eyesight, but all of us have difficulty seeing and understanding things at times. The events in the passage we just heard from Luke's Gospel took place just 3 days after Jesus was crucified. They show how some of Jesus' disciples had trouble understanding what they had seen. When Jesus died, his followers thought that he was gone forever. They didn't know what to do. They were very sad. They couldn't see things clearly because they were so mixed up and upset. Two of Jesus' friends were sadly walking back to their home in the village of Emmaus when another traveler joined them on the road. They didn't recognize who it was, but they began to talk to him and tell him all about what had happened to Jesus and how sad they were. The two men revealed they still did not understand who Jesus was. They saw him as a mighty prophet, not as the Messiah and Son of God. Luke carefully notes the difference in attitude toward Jesus between the people and the chief priests and rulers, and this is a constant theme in Luke's Gospel. When it was evening, they arrived at their home and invited the stranger to stay with them and have supper. They sat down to eat, and when the traveler broke the bread and blessed it, something happened. It was as if they had put on little Emmett's glasses. Suddenly they saw clearly what they hadn't seen before, even though they had been looking right at it most of the day. They realized that the stranger who had joined them on the road was really Jesus, alive and well. After Jesus left them, they ran back to Jerusalem to tell the other disciples. These two men were disciples of Jesus, perhaps among the 70 that Jesus sent out. They had heard the message of Christ's resurrection, but their hearts were broken, believing it was a fraud. Sometimes we feel confused and don't see things clearly. When that happens, we need help understanding our lives more clearly. Jesus is with us to help us to do that. He helps us to understand that God loves us and that there is nothing to be afraid of. Many of us hope that there is a force out there that might be trying to encourage us to improve our lives. And there is. It is the Christian faith. This might be the last place most of us think of finding this power. Christianity might seem to be very dull and boring, but that is because we forgot that the most powerful force in the universe is within us. That is the message of the Emmaus Road story. We must always remember that we have the ultimate source of power and love within us as we travel on our own Emmaus roads. For these two men, when Jesus died on the cross, all their hopes of rescue from Roman opposition had died with him. Because their hope was gone, they discounted the testimony of the women at the empty tomb. They still saw him as a prophet. The resurrected Jesus challenges our false assumptions. Without the resurrection, Jesus is just a martyr, a moral teacher, a dead hero, or even a liar. The resurrection of Jesus challenges the common false beliefs of our culture, that all religions are true, all truths are equal, and any attempt at morality will earn you a seat in heaven. There is a sense of disappointment in this story. We tend to gloss over it. We tend to move too quickly towards some kind of resolution. We flee from the cross-like experiences of life for the promise of resurrection. This happens in both the church and in real life. We want to meet Jesus on the road of life. We want him to help us make sense of everything that is going on in our world. We want to see him around the communion table and in the breaking of bread. Jesus answered their doubts as he talked to them. Some people have the same doubts today, but Jesus can answer their doubts if they spend time with him and study his word. When he sees sincere seekers with confused hearts, he will do whatever it takes to help them see his will. That's what he was doing on the road to Emmaus. Jesus gave the two disciples and us a new way of seeing the scriptures we know with new eyes that were opened. We see the scriptures from a completely different point of view. Even if we have never walked a road to Emmaus, we have all walked with both men. Who among us does not carry the burden of grief, loss, and guilt at the death of someone we love? Who does not feel some sense of sadness and bewilderment when we are confronted by death of any sort, whether it be the death of a spouse, lover, child, or parent, the death of a marriage or a relationship? the death of a job or sense of self. The words the disciples spoke on the road to Emmaus were words of pain, disappointment, bewilderment, and yearning. They are the same words we say when we come to the end of our hopes, when our expectations have not been met, when our dreams are dead, when there is nothing left to do but leave, defeated and done. When death comes to us, it comes in a haze of defeat, sadness, and bewilderment. It comes to us in the midst of grief, guilt, and loss. It comes to us in darkness and despair as night is approaching, not just out there, but in our hearts. The two men saw before them not a ghost or a vision, but the reality of larger life that is possible in Jesus. We see that the grave and death are not the end, but the gate and door to something much larger. Christ's resurrection is a life of victory and joy and wonder. It is a life of hope that tells us that death in any form is not the end, but the gate and door of something new. Jesus' rebuke to correct his followers' misunderstanding in this instance is a good word to believers in every era to pay attention to all the scriptures. While the Bible certainly portrays the Messiah as a ruling king, it also presents him as a suffering servant. Both parts of the scripture must be honored and believed. Perhaps he expounded on the Messianic Psalms or spoke of Abraham and Isaac, explaining that although God had spared Isaac, he had not spared his own son. Or perhaps he quoted Isaiah chapter 53 verse 6, saying, "All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all." The events of Easter are not part of a creed or philosophy. We are asked to meet the Jesus who was raised from the dead. We move in faith from belief in the resurrection to knowledge of a person. In his resurrection, Jesus moves our faith to the present tense from the past tense. In return, we are to be part of what he is doing in our world. As the men drew near their destination, Christ did not force himself into their home. He waited until they invited him in, and then he became a crucial part of their lives. Jesus the guest quickly became Jesus the host. In an Eastern setting, bread was not sliced but came as an entire loaf. To serve the bread, the person broke off a piece and gave it to another. Apparently, Jesus' distinct way of doing this revealed his identity. Instantly, Jesus vanished from their sight, having previously promised in Luke chapter 22, verse 16, that he would not eat with his disciples again until he was in the kingdom. Now the kingdom had come. Jesus comes and walks with us where we are. He walks with us amid challenges and grief, amid darkness and despair. He comes to us where we are, walking among us amid questions about death and darkness, loss and limits, questions about pain and wounds, fear and imperfection, questions about what just happened and how we will continue. Jesus has come to open our eyes, ears, and hearts so that we can truly see him. How do we recognize Jesus? First, we recognize him by knowing the Bible and spending time with him. Second, we recognize him when we spend time with fellow believers. Third, we need to have a heightened awareness. We need to expect that Jesus will reveal himself to us. Finally, we need to make time for him in our lives. Jesus said in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in." We must allow him to enter into our lives. A good suggestion is to take a few minutes each day just to say, "Lord, I'm setting this time aside. I want you to come in and spend time with me." If we don't, he goes on without bothering us, for he does not intrude. In his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, author Stephen Covey wrote about a time when he was on a subway at the end of the day. He was tired. A man boarded the train with his 2 rambunctious boys. They were inconsiderate of other passengers. Stephen Covey was so bothered that he reached a boiling point and had to say something to the man. "Sir, aren't you going to do something about these boys? They are bothering everyone." The man, almost as if he had awakened from a stupor, said, "Yes, I'm sorry. I'm not thinking straight. We've just left the hospital.